What's up, First Take fam? Thank you so much for being with us on this Friday Eve. Remember to catch us weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. But right now, it's all about the trade deadline that is nearing. Could Melo, Jimmy Butler, or Blake Griffin be the last piece to help win a championship? Plus, what should we expect when Boogie Cousins and Anthony Davis take on the Rockets tonight? And critics are saying Magic Johnson should have hired an African-American GM for the Lakers. Did they have a point? Let's get it started. It's trade deadline day. Who will go and who will stay? Yes, welcome to First Take on this Friday Eve. Max and Molly holding things down in Bristol. Hello, Max. Stephen A. in good spirits. How we doing?
I would like to say something for a quick second, Max Kellerman, Molly Kieran. Let me tell y'all something. Today is one of my favorite days of the year when it comes to being on First Take, because it is an absolute nightmare for beat writers to cover today because they have to chase these stories. But since, I've elevated my stature in the world of television, I don't have to do such things anymore, which makes me feel very, very sorry and sympathetic to my brethren, those beat writers out there, but very, very fortunate and blessed for myself.
Isn't that amazing? Like, everyone has to chase down sources, right? Yeah. Until you have a platform that's big enough, and then the sources chase you down. Stephen A. Smith, the phone doesn't stop with the text all throughout the show.
That would be true.
The hard work has paid off, as we know. All right, gentlemen, let's start with the reigning champs, and the streets are talking. So we've heard the Kevin Love for Carmelo Anthony rumors, and now we're hearing the Rockets have talked with the Cavs about acquiring Iman Shumpert before today's trade deadline, according to league sources. Stephen A., do the Cavs need to make a move right now to defend their crown this season?
In my opinion, I think they do. I would love for them to get a Carmelo Anthony. Listen, I like Kevin Love a lot. I think the man can play some basketball. I think he's gotten a bad rap in the past, and I got a lot of love for him, not just as a player, but as a person. But when I think about the Golden State Warriors, and I think about LeBron James and what he plays for at this stage and point of his career, which is all about the chips, to me, you've got to make a move to give yourself the best opportunity to win. You don't know how healthy J.R. Smith is going to be. You'll need him in concert with a Kyle Korver to help out Kyrie Irving in that backcourt and to help LeBron James and Kyrie Irving to spell for them, because they don't need to be the lone playmakers that you have. That is fair. But on the flip side to it as well, when you think about Kevin Love, you don't know how healthy he's going to be when he comes back. And even if healthy, as fluid as his game is, and as much as it works in concert with the rest of what Cleveland tries to do as a basketball team, I just think that against Golden State, their length, their ability to defend perimeter play and beyond, when there's time to make a move, when things break down, I always bring this up, Max, when things break down, do you have that dude who can still break you down? I don't believe that they have that third guy. I think they need it in order to beat Golden State. That's the only reason I would think about making a move right now if I was Cleveland, Max.
I mean, usually if you need that third guy, it's off the bench. Not if you have two guys who can do that better than anyone in your starting lineup. Usually you don't need a third. I'll say this. The Cavs are probably not going to win a championship this year, no matter what they do. And by the way, Cavs fans, you can calm down. You probably weren't going to win a championship last year, no matter what you did, and yet you won a championship. But that's why it was an amazing upset coming back from 3-1 against a 73-win team. This year, the 73-win team, a little less defensively without Bogut. They added Durant. They won't win as many games. They'll be even deadlier, you would think, come playoff time. So you're probably not. You're going to be the underdog, the Cavs, in the finals, no matter what. The question then becomes, how do you optimize your chances to actually win? Do they need to make a deal or not? The answer is yes. They will be more likely to beat the Warriors in the finals if they make a deal than if they don't. Then the question becomes, for whom? Stephen A., I think a Carmelo trade would actually be disastrous for them in the short run, because he is a major offensive piece to integrate without a ton of time to do it. A lot of times we see a major piece come to a team and it takes them a full season to integrate. Sometimes, I know it's not an exact analogy, but like with the big three, took them 2 years before they were fully functioning. That first year they imploded against Dallas. It'll be a little different here, Carmelo joining a unit that's already otherwise integrated. But still, that's a huge piece, and you'd have to give up a lot to get him, etc. I do think they need to add someone, but I don't think it's nearly as fancy as adding Carmelo Anthony. You know what they need, Stephen A. Smith, and they've needed it all year? They need Dellavedova. They need the guy they let go. They need the guy that you complained about them not locking up long-term cheap when they had the chance. Because Dellavedova is more valuable to the Cavs than to anyone, including the Bucks or anyone else. They need that guy or a guy just like him. A point guard off the bench, a tough-minded guy who can run your offense off the bench so LeBron can rest a little bit, so Kyrie can rest a little bit, who's tough-minded with some championship pedigree. Dellavedova would be perfect. They let him go. They need to replace him.
Delly.
Max Kellerman, I can't believe that you're going to have me here on national television trying to imitate Mark McGuire, but I must by telling you when you bring up Matthew Dellavedova, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm not here to talk about the past. Okay? The bottom line is this, Max.
I see in your locker.
They're valid. There you go. They're valid. The points are valid, Max. But here's the part where I got you. Max, and I don't think that you've appreciated the point that you've made on many, many occasions. So work with me here with one-word answers. Who do you call the best player in the world?
LeBron James.
There we go. That's 2 words. Only one was needed. Which was LeBron. You call him the best player in the world, Max, but you ignore that reality when it comes to the notion of bringing on a talent like Carmelo. You're looking at Carmelo, and I don't disagree with you if you're just looking at Carmelo. I'm looking at who Carmelo would be playing with. And when you talk about LeBron, what makes him so great? It's not just his physical prowess. It's not just his greatness in terms of his athletic ability, his finishing ability, his experience, etc. It's what he does to the troops around him, how he affects them, how he galvanizes them, how he's somehow, some way able to bring them together. And I'm saying to you, when you consider the greatness of LeBron and how much better he makes everybody else, I would ask you this question, Max, and I'll throw it to you. Could you imagine if LeBron actually made Melo better?
He would. He did. He has.
I know you would. But I'm asking you to imagine, just step back and imagine if Melo were better than we already agree we know he is. Could you imagine what that looks like?
And I think long term, for example, next season, or had he acquired Carmelo in this preseason, I would agree with you. Because we've seen them play in the Olympics. And we've seen them play together many times, by the way. And LeBron and others on a team with stars a lot of times use Carmelo as the primary scoring option for good reason. He's the most talented overall scorer. And LeBron would likely use him that way. I think if Carmelo was on the Cavs, he'd lead the team in scoring for the number of games he played. That's over LeBron. That's over Kyrie. Even if Kevin Love's on the, whoever's there. But LeBron would use him that way. It's just not enough time to integrate that large a piece into a system that's going to go up against a well-oiled machine like Golden State.
But that's what I'm asking you. You're basically let's nip this argument in the bud once and for all. Max Kellerman, you're basically saying that the player that you believe to be the greatest in the world, who's a 3-time champion, who's been to 7 NBA finals, whose resume is so impeccable in terms of his ability to maximize the potential around him, you're essentially saying you don't believe LeBron James can get Melo ready enough in time to help knock off Golden State this season.
Yes, that's one.
That's what you're saying.
That's one.
Right.
But 2, you also, in order even to make the salaries fit, have to give up someone like Tristan Thompson and minimum, or Kevin Love, just to make the salaries fit.
But I'm talking about Kevin Love. I'm talking about the swap. I'm talking about the Kevin Love-Melo swap.
Okay, then I would say one of the reasons Kevin Love actually fits on the Cavs, let's not forget, what you mentioned about LeBron is true. He makes any group of guys function better than anyone else would make them function. One of the reasons why Kyrie Irving is actually underrated right now, because a lot of times he's off ball, because that's the way the team...
Kyrie's not underrated.
I think
Kyrie's not underrated.
I think people are sleeping on him a little bit.
No. We all know how nasty that brother is.
I hope so. But the point is, when he's off ball, he's not going to put up the same numbers as a Westbrook or a Harden, because the team functions better, LeBron using him the way he uses him. Kevin Love, too. Kevin Love is not perceived the way he was in Minnesota when his numbers were inflated, because he's used in specific ways. But his skills translate very well to the way the Cavs run their offense. His outlet passing. He's an elite guy for a power forward there. His outside shooting, his rebounding. Those are all things that fit within what the Cavs do perfectly. That's not what Carmelo really does. Yes, Carmelo can shoot, But I wouldn't say he's a sharp shooter from the outside like Kevin Love. He doesn't pass like Kevin Love. He doesn't crash the boards like Kevin Love. Those are all things that are needed on this team. So you're actually losing a lot of the stuff you need to get what you're talking about. And in addition to that, you got to integrate what you're talking about before the playoffs to have a chance. Just
and
pick
I'm
up a
saying
backup
to you,
point guard.
But once again, I think the point that you're missing, which is why you're going on and on trying to defend your point, is because you're focused on the talents and the skills of Carmelo Anthony. I'm focused on my belief that talent combined with the greatness of LeBron can elevate to extreme levels quickly. I think it's that. I think their friendship, I think their relationship, I think the fact that they've practiced together in the past, I think the fact that they're so close and they know each other so well, combined with their requisite skills, is something you are sleeping on and underestimating in terms of the quickness with which they can gel. That's all. We're not debating basketball itself from an individual perspective in terms of talent. I agree with every point that you're making. My point to you is that you're underestimating and literally sleeping on the quickness with which they could gel. Well, that's the difference between you and I.
Okay, right I would say this. It ain't sexy and big, but go pick up a backup point guard. I mean, that's really what you need to do. You don't need to move heaven and earth. Just get a backup point guard if you're the Cavs.
You need a little more than that. For the Warriors, you need a little more than that.
Yeah, the Clippers might need something, too, because they haven't been able to get past the second round over the last 5 years with Blake Griffin and CP3 together. So the Celtics and Clippers have also been talking about a swap that would send Blake Griffin to Boston. That, according to our Zach Lowe. But it does appear to be a long shot. Max.
Yeah.
Do the Clippers have to move Blake?
I can't believe I'm saying this. The answer is yes, they have to move Blake. And he's the guy you would look at that team and say he's the youngest of the elite talent they have. DeAndre Jordan's really good, proud of the progress he made. I know that sounds patronizing, but, you know, he's a second-round project, and he turns into this excellent max contract player. Good for him. But Blake and CP3 are on another level. And Blake is the younger of the two. And Blake is this high-flying act who, in addition to that, has developed this great overall game. And yet the Clippers have shown they can win without Blake. Blake is injury-prone. Blake is a free agent. Maybe he doesn't re-sign. You ain't going to beat the Warriors. I mean, like, Doc Rivers thinks that this is his best group of guys and everything. They're going to beat the Warriors. Doc, stop. You know you're not going to beat the Warriors. Just be honest with yourself. You got to move this guy now while you can get something for him. And by the way, when you look at the Celtics and the Jimmy Butler deal, if Crowder is the holdup, whatever, the Celtics have other assets, including the Nets draft pick. It might be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. It's unprotected. And Avery Bradley and others. So and by the way, love Jimmy Butler. Maybe he's a better fit on the Celtics. But Blake Griffin's better than Jimmy Butler. I mean, Blake Griffin, if he's available, is the best available player right now in the NBA. So a guy who you may lose for nothing anyway, a guy who doesn't necessarily fit with what you're doing with CP3 and you've shown you can win without him, an injury-prone guy, you can get a haul for him right now, and you ain't going to win you ain't getting out of the Western Conference. Why wouldn't you do that?
You know what? You and I agree with this because, I look at Blake Griffin. Listen, this is a guy that a couple of years ago when they lost and they blew that 3-2 lead against the Houston Rockets in the Western Conference semifinals. This is a guy that averaged, 25 and 12 in the postseason. Last year, he was injured. Let's look at him, and he played in 4 playoff games. He averaged 25 and 12 the year before. Last year, he only averaged 15. He was clearly not healthy. We get all of that. I just think the ship has sailed on Blake Griffin in L.A. And what I mean by that is in terms of him being a part of a championship formula. I'm not saying that he's not a great talent. Blake Griffin is a great talent. Blake Griffin could be box office for somebody. Blake Griffin has all the requisite skills. He belongs on this level. But there are levels to this, as we both always say. And I think when you talk about the elite of the elite, the creme de la creme, I think Blake Griffin, even though he works, even though CP3 is there, and you would think that the quintessential point guard that is CP3 would work for anybody, I think since CP3 has been in L.A., even though Blake has his numbers, the same fervor, the Skywalker's mentality, the aggression, and all the things that come with it, something is missing there. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. People have speculated that the relationship is not the greatest. I don't get that. CP has always told me they've had a good relationship. My only point is that there's something missing from Blake Griffin. And when I think about the Golden State Warriors, or even to a lesser degree the Houston Rockets, I don't worry too much about the Clippers because of Blake Griffin. I worry about CP3. I worry about DeAndre Jordan, who will dunk in on anybody, who rebounds and blocks shots. But I don't find myself too concerned about Blake Griffin. You need a third component with the Los Angeles Clippers that the opposition literally has to fear on both ends of the floor. If I could, and I know they probably can't, Max, if I could, would I trade Blake Griffin for Paul George? Yes, I would.
Sure.
In a Clippers uniform.
Absolutely.
I would do that deal.
Yeah,
I would do that deal.
Or by the way, and this sounds crazy because you think you can get more for him, but if Carmelo Anthony's available and the only way is to trade a guy who...
Well, you know how I feel about that.
Right,
yeah.
But then Carmelo's with Chris Paul. In L.A., that becomes a lure for LeBron James in addition to everything else. The crazy thing is, I know what Doc... I imagine what Doc must be thinking, which is you look at the Warriors without Bogut, and you think they're vulnerable to a team that can get in the paint, down low, post up. And Blake has a post game. He just refuses to go down there. Either Doc's not calling the plays or he doesn't want to go down there.
But he don't want to go down there. He don't want to go down there enough.
And that's crazy because Blake was once just this high-flying, amazing physical talent. Remember, President Obama at the time told Chris Paul, tell Blake he needs to get a 15-footer. Blake went out and got one. Blake showed an amazing overall game, passing, shooting, the whole thing. And then the question was, is he saving himself? Does he not have the explosive kind of hops that he used to have? When playoff time came around, he showed that he does have those hops. He just added this overall dimension to it. And you would think he should be a top 3 or 4 player in the league right now. But that unwillingness to get down low and maybe the dynamics on the team are stopping that. He's about to be a free agent.
Well,
if the Clippers don't get something for him and he leaves for nothing, that's a monumental failure on Doc's part as a GM.
My issue with Blake Griffin is in part with Doc Rivers because I think Doc Rivers allows him to dribble the ball too much. How many times, Max, have we seen Blake Griffin get the ball 15, 19 feet away from the basket, and he's dribbling it between his legs and, spinning and doing all of this other stuff? You're 6'10", and you're a Skywalker. You're a man amongst boys on most nights. Utilize that to your advantage and command a level of respect and, dare I say, intimidation that forces teams to pay attention to you in a different fashion. We don't revere Chris Paul just because of his abilities on a basketball court. It's because he's a pit bull and he comes at it, and you know that he's coming at you at every turn, and he will abuse you, he will embarrass you, he will annihilate you if you are not ready to go. That is the kind of mentality that we would like to see from Blake Griffin. We have not seen that for a very long time.
Just strategically, you remember with the Thunder, when Harden and Westbrook, and Harden was the sixth man, a lot of people say, well, why don't you play the best players all at the same time? And as it turns out, the team somehow didn't function as well with Westbrook and Harden on the floor together as they did separately, partly because there were redundant skills as primary ball handlers. And the crazy thing about Blake on the Clippers, because you'd never think this, what do Chris Paul and Blake Griffin have in common? Point guard, power forward, they should work perfectly together. There's some redundant skills there. Blake, when he's on the court without Chris Paul, sometimes is kind of running the offense. I mean, he's throwing up lobs to DeAndre Jordan and stuff. So there, even though it doesn't seem it on the surface, there is some redundancy there. And if you're going to lose him anyway, which you might, and you ain't going to beat the Warriors, especially not with the way you're utilizing the personnel, get something for him now.
Well, you know what the
Be
funny
it
part
Carmelo
is, Max?
Anthony or the Nets pick that the Celtics have or something.
You know what the funny part is, Max? Blake Griffin actually puts the ball on the floor from the perimeter a lot.
A lot.
So considering that, don't you think that's even more of a reason that you should get Melo? Because he don't put the ball on the floor better than Melo.
Magic is just 2 days on the job and already trying to make things happen before today's NBA trade deadline. Now, according to USA Today, the Lakers are trying to land Paul George from the Pacers, noting that the California native would love to sign with Los Angeles when he becomes a free agent in 2018. Max, is trading for Paul George a good or bad idea?
A terrible idea.
Terrible?
It's a terrible idea. I can't believe. Look, first of all, I understand the thought. The thought is get relevant, get a star that can lure other stars. And Paul George, by the way, for a couple of years, at least a year before it became popular to say, I was arguing with callers on LA radio, along with Marcellus Wiley, Stephen A., explaining to everyone he's clearly better than Carmelo Anthony. And everyone lost their minds. I'm a huge Paul George fan. He is an excellent two-way player, both ends of the floor. Excellent. But let's be honest about this. He's not LeBron James or KD. And when you look at the Lakers, well, the Lakers have always had stars. Yeah, Magic and Kareem, those kind of stars, all first ballot all time, maybe best ever at their position, Hall of Famers. Kobe and Shaq, same thing. Paul George is not that. Paul George is excellent, but he ain't Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's not Kobe Bryant. Sorry. He's excellent. To have to give up the kind of assets the Lakers would now have to give up to get a 27-year-old who's not the greatest ever at his position, who doesn't have the kind of star power that LeBron James or the effectiveness that a LeBron James or a KD has, not quite, doesn't make sense to me, particularly when, if he really wants to be in Los Angeles, he's from L.A., he can always sign there, and you give up no prospects to get him. The Lakers have a core of young 20-somethings who are not ready for prime time. To me, it does not make sense to bring in a late 20-something who's owed a max deal where you have to give up those assets to get him, and by himself is not good enough to win a championship. And by the way, even with Westbrook, who says that's good enough to win a championship, Westbrook had KD, who's better than Paul George, and other stars on the team and never won a championship. I would say patience here if you're the Lakers.
I respectfully disagree with you. First of all, you have to make up your mind. You can't sit up there and look at the notion of Carmelo Anthony ending up being a Clipper and allude to the attraction that it would ultimately have in terms of appeal to LeBron James ultimately coming there, but not apply the same situation to a Paul George in terms of what other prospective free agents might come down the line. The Los Angeles Lakers, you would have a point, Max, if the Los Angeles Lakers with the Cleveland Cavaliers just won the title and then all of a sudden nosedived. You'd have a point. But the level of ineptitude that has sifted through this franchise like a virus is in desperate need of resuscitation. And as a result, what has transpired is this. They have stunk so much for so long that it's about sending hope to a city like Los Angeles in terms of us moving in the right direction. Here's what I love about it and what I think you're ignoring. When I get on Phil Jackson, obviously he drafted Kristaps Porzingis and all of this stuff. But my issue with Phil Jackson is that you're the president of basketball operations who's an 11-time champion who's supposed to garner such respect and adulation and reverence, and you can't even get stars to sit down and have dinner with you. If you are Magic Johnson, what you're doing is sending the message that this is a place made for stars. How bad do you want to be one? Now, you are right. Paul George ain't LeBron James. You're right about that. Paul George isn't a Russell Westbrook. He isn't a Kevin Durant, somebody like that. That's fine. But let me tell you something right now. Paul George, two-way player, you'd be hard-pressed to find 10 players in the league better.
Agreed.
This brother's special. And so what you're talking about is, forget the name Paul George, Max. Forget the name for a second. Pay attention instead to the fact that you would be getting a top 10 player who averages 22 a game, who came off his nasty injury in the Summer Olympics, right, and still averaged 23 last year. That's getting better and better now that his health has been restored. And he's getting back to his old self, who performed in a playoff series against the Miami Heat and LeBron James, forcing them to a 7th game. So he has playoff experience. You could potentially get a top 10 player by his 27th birthday instead of hoping that a couple of young dudes ultimately end up being at least what he is.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I look at it.
Look, I agree with that, and I also agree with the fact that Paul George is a championship player. There are some players where you wonder, can they be at least, let's say, the second best player on a championship team? I think the answer for Paul George is absolutely yes. Like, who's better, Kawhi Leonard or Paul George? That's a real debate. Paul George is that good, and in fact, I think Kawhi has recently put himself in the position where you would question whether Paul George is as good as him, because you go back 2 years, few people would take Kawhi over Paul George. The point is, he's that good. You're absolutely right. A top 10 player doesn't need the ball to be effective, but can score. Second best player on a championship team type. If he was 23, I would agree with you. Give up the young assets to get him. What I find dangerous is this notion, and it happens in big markets, L.A. and New York, that you need to do something to be relevant. You need to do something to give the fans hope. That was the kind of wrong-headed thinking that led to the Carmelo trade for the Knicks, where they said, yeah, just give him everything. Throw Mozgov and Wilson Chandler. Sure, go ahead, do it. Do everything, because we need to give the fans hope. How did that work out? They've stunk since then. They have one good season. Otherwise, they've stunk. When you take it, like the incredible thing about the late, great Dr. Jerry Buss, the greatest owner in the history of American team sports, Lakers owner, was that he was somehow able to do both. Be the winningest owner in sports while giving everyone showtime. That's incredibly difficult. Usually when people start focusing on anything other than winning, it goes bad. Let's give the fans hope. Let's give them a good show. Let's have an entertaining team. You took your eye off the ball. You have to try to win. Dr. Buss could somehow manage it. The rest of everybody on planet Earth better just think about winning championships. And trading your assets now for Paul George, who is 27, which means when you re-sign him, you're going to start to pay for some decline most likely. Trading those assets now when you may just be able to sign him down the line. And anyway, this franchise is not ready to take the next step. The move is premature, I think is foolhardy. Stephen A., I'll give you a chess analogy quickly. In chess, if you're looking to make a move, to really be aggressive, but you have not controlled the middle of the board, and you look to do it prematurely, it'll wind up bad for you. Your pieces have to be positioned right. If they are, then you can start looking for combinations that favor you. Right now, this is a Lakers team, and Magic Johnson, it seems to me, that's looking to pull off a combination when the pieces aren't yet properly positioned. I know the argument is he's trying to position you by getting Paul George to make another move. I think it's premature.
Well, you think it's premature. I think that you're wrong. And the reason why I think you're wrong, first of all, when you bring up Carmelo Anthony and the move to the New York Knicks, have you ever asked yourself what would have happened if the New York Knicks simply stood pat, let Mike Woodson stay in as the coach, and by the way, just replaced Jason Kidd? That's not about Melo. That's organizational dysfunctionality.
Yeah.
That's what happened with the New York Knicks. You can't put that on Carmelo. That's number one. Number two, when we talk about Paul George, you got to remember, he's a sensational third option, a big-time bona fide second option, and a solid first option. So when you take that into consideration, I love how you're talking about Paul George like he's some 35-year-old. Paul George is 26. He'll be 27 in May. He's the same age as Russell Westbrook. He's younger than Kevin Durant, younger than Melo, younger than LeBron James, and all of these other guys. Paul George has at least 6 or 7 years in this league before we see a slide. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. I'm also looking at
I think he has 3 or 4 years before a slide, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's say I disagree with that, but I disagree with that, but that's not even a big deal. The point is, let's take your argument. It's 3 or 4 years. It's Los Angeles. It's the Lakers. It's also the elevation of cap money because of the TV money that came in and beyond. It's elevating the level of flexibility that teams have. Paul George is not limiting the Los Angeles Lakers from doing anything. He's elevating the level of respectability that they will have, which will ultimately assist in them attracting potential free agents,
Paul George
which is
and Russell
something they're
Westbrook.
not doing now.
Guys,
If Westbrook and Durant didn't win a title with Ibaka and earlier Harden and later Adams and others, you think Paul George and Westbrook's enough to win a title, even a single title?
I think Paul George is the first step towards that, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Ezekiel Elliott was in the middle of a police incident at an Ohio bar over the weekend. His best friend was getting arrested for bringing a loaded gun to the place. TMZ Sports posted a video of Ezekiel speaking with cops in front of the bar on Friday night. And while he was not detained, arrested, or accused of any wrongdoing, law enforcement sources told TMZ that his friend tried to name drop, claiming that Ezekiel's his brother. Zeke is still under investigation, keep in mind, by the NFL for domestic violence allegations. We now welcome Will Kane to the show. Will, how we doing?
Doing well.
Let's get into your team here. Are you concerned about Zeke's off-the-field issues?
Yeah, I am. I am concerned, but that's exactly the right word. I'm concerned because I care. And the list is getting long. Now, make perfectly clear. The list of Ezekiel Elliott's supposed indiscretions right now rely on rumor. They are largely innocuous, and some of them are in the realm of accusation. Nevertheless, the list is getting long. Coming out of college, there was reportedly at the Combine a reputation for partying. There was the rumor of party drugs. There was the visit to the pot shop, which is innocuous.
I forgot about that.
In fact, it reveals
in Seattle,
it could reveal a sense of curiosity. Anybody visiting Colorado or Washington right now, they'd be curious to see how this whole legalization thing is going down. But the list keeps getting longer. And of course, there is the domestic violence accusation, which the police at this point have cleared him of and dismissed. And now you have this, where his best friend is apparently arrested and looks like he could be charged with the felony of carrying a gun into a bar, essentially, or to a zone around a bar. But I want to be very clear. I think I've earned a reputation on this show, whether or not it has earned me esteem or been reviled for it, of pointing out that accusations are simply accusations, and they can be nothing more than that. And none of these incidents on their own are Ezekiel's guilty of, nor do they inform each other. Just because you have a rumor about one doesn't mean you're guilty of another. That being said, I do, as any logical human being does, see the not infallible maxim of where there's smoke, there's fire. And Jerry Jones has said there's a pattern of behavior that he is concerned about. Concern, Max, is the word. I would simply want to know with Zeke, as one of my players, hey, man, we got this thing between the lines. Are we on the right track? Because every once in a while it looks like we're veering into the shoulder. And we want to have a long-term relationship together. And I just want to make sure everything we're doing here is on the up and up.
Yeah, look, smoke, fire. That's why people would be concerned right now. And sure, and there's some wisdom to that. There's a reason it's a cliche. In Zeke's case, I do think some of this is exaggerated because of the just amount of media nowadays. And you could argue, look, there's the same amount of media for everyone, although he's the running back, Rookie of the Year running back for the Dallas Cowboys MVP candidate. It's a little bit different. But still, why does this keep happening to him if it's happening to him and he's not the catalyst ever, or there's something about him that's not attracting this? It's not happening to others. Okay, that's a fair point. I would, again, point to his position as a media star, given the team he plays for, the position he plays for, his level of production.
The Cowboys always garner such extra attention, yeah.
In the old days, a lot of this stuff would never see the light of day. It would not. There wasn't as much media. Now, for the Cowboys, some of this stuff would still come out, and it used to. Ask Michael Irvin about it, right? So he might have a little reputation anyway. But I largely agree with Will. Until something is substantiated where there is wrongdoing on his part, I can't hold him accountable for the fact that his friend made a mistake, or that he went where it's legal to a drug spot, even if it's not for medicinal purposes. Like, you could argue, well, there's opiates are used in football for pain tolerance. What about marijuana? No, even if it's just recreational. It wouldn't bother me much if it was
curiosity.
Even if it was just, right,
just
sure.
Going doesn't mean you bought it.
Absolutely.
Buying it doesn't mean you used it.
Right, absolutely. So the smoke fire thing does hold up, but it is unfair to let all this stuff add up until something is substantiated.
Stephen A?
Well, that's why I'm not concerned. And that's why I think it's an absolute travesty we're even having this discussion, because ultimately, while we are sitting here talking about how we're not going to convict him or anything like that, essentially his name is on national television and let's highlight this. Let's highlight the particulars of this. One of his boys gets busted, for doing something that he wasn't supposed to do. He says he's a friend of Ezekiel's, which means that Ezekiel, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, was he even in the vicinity? Was he with the guy?
He was.
At all?
He was. He was in the bar. He was in the bar.
So he says, well, he's in the bar, I'm a friend of his, and because he's in the bar and that's a friend of his, now he gets implicated. All I'm saying is that these kind of things are the kind of things that we have to be careful of, because we live in a society where it cherry picks who to dismiss these kind of things about and who to use it against as fodder to continue to sully their name, their character, or what have you in some way. Now, far be it for me to come to the defense of a Dallas Cowboy. Please don't get me started with that. But this is one of those situations where I think it calls for. Ezekiel Elliott was accused of something. It was dropped by the police. The NFL supposedly dropped it, and then they decide to revisit the situation, and they're still investigating, having no regard for how it could potentially impugn his integrity or his reputation when we don't appear to have any proof to sit up here and deal with the man. You've got the minor traffic incident. Certainly going to the weed spot in Seattle, that was dumb on his part. I laughed about that because I expect that from a Dallas Cowboy. I'm just going to admit it. I just expect that from a Dallas Cowboy. But when it comes to something like this, just imagine that you're out with your friend, your boy does something stupid, and he's like, I'm his boy, I'm with him, and because you're a Dallas Cowboy is the only reason it's news. I understand it happens. I get it. I can't sit up there and summarily dismiss the fact that, Will Cain is concerned and Max Kellerman is concerned because where there's smoke, there's potentially fire. I'm just saying it's something inherently unfair about it. if you don't have anything on the guy and we're talking about him on national television, it's just unfortunate. That's all I'm saying.
Let me counter you with this. Okay, first of all, concern is different than judgment. Judgment is different than condemnation. All of those things are different. Hopefully we can have this conversation in a responsible way that A, doesn't condemn him, B, doesn't even judge him, and certainly doesn't sully his name. But how about this for concern, Stephen A? The NFL doesn't share our high burden of proof on condemnation, whether or not it's the NFL's drug abuse policy entering substance 1 or this long domestic violence investigation that has gone on for Ezekiel Elliott. If you think all of these things that are completely unrelated don't play into the NFL's investigation, then we're just putting on blinders, because I can tell you they look at every single one of these things. They decide to prolong the investigation. They look deeper. There was even, just to be clear, Stephen A., back in September, there was, during the domestic violence investigation, there was a report that Ezekiel Elliott had texted this girl about whether or not he was going to pass a drug test. I
did not see that. I did not know that.
Well, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't mean he was guilty. It doesn't mean he used drugs. But the point is this. The NFL can use that. You don't have to test positive for drugs to be put into the drug policy program. You don't have to. They can use every single one of these extraneous things unfairly, and that, my friend, is cause for concern.
That may be cause for concern, but let's put the concern where it is. How come there isn't cause and concern for how the NFL does business?
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying to you is that when we bring up the points that you just made, then the focal point may very well should be on the NFL instead of the individual player that we're talking about here.
Except Stephen A., the smoke fire issue comes down to this. Essentially what we're all talking about is the kind of judgment that Ezekiel Elliott is exercising. And it comes out in different ways. Even the fact that, and each one in and of itself may be unfair, that there are DV allegations. Why are you in a position where something like that could happen? That they see you outside of a legal weed spot. Maybe you're allowed to do it, but maybe it's not such a good look. That your best friend or a close friend thinks it's okay, is exercising the kind of judgment.
That's the biggest concern to me, the company you potentially getting you in trouble.
So the big picture, and to your point, Will, about concern is what kind of general judgment are you exercising, considering you're a public-facing person in a high-profile position? And the NFL would like those kind of players to internalize their values as it relates to their business. Stay totally out of any situation that could bring any negative publicity to you at all. And the fact that he has now been in that situation fairly or unfairly, whether it's substantiated eventually or not, in at least 3 different incidences is why I believe Cowboys fans like Will Kane are concerned.
Well, I want to make sure about one thing with Stephen A. I don't want my years, age 20 to 24, poured over and judged on rumor and innuendo. I doubt that you do either, or Max for that matter, or Molly for that matter. We all do things that veer on the shoulders of the road. But the concern is only this. Not that Ezekiel Elliott's a bad guy. Not that he's even guilty of anything. Just making sure. Are you keeping it between the lines? Because you're important to us. You're important to your family. You're important to a lot of people. Are we on the straight and narrow?
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another hour of First Take. Thank you so much for hanging with us. We covered a lot of ground in hour number 1. Max Kellerman, what are you hot on for number 2?
Boogie Cousins and Anthony Davis on the same team. Holy Twin Towers! I mean, that is a dynamic duo. But who's Batman? Coming up right now, same time, same channel, second hour of First Take.
4 takes, that's you. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, you got me.
The same day, the Lakers named Magic Johnson president of basketball operations. Rob Pelinka, who is white, and Kobe Bryant's longtime agent agreed to be the Lakers' next general manager. Now, according to the Undefeated's Mark Spears, this news had a lot of black GM candidates feeling snubbed. One high-ranking black NBA team executive said, quote, Kobe obviously had influence in getting Pelinka pushed through the door. The league has over 75% black players and only has 3 black general managers among 30 teams. Stephen A., I want to start with you on this one. Should this even be a topic that's up for discussion?
No, it should not be. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm disappointed that African American, aspiring executives, scouts, coaches, and beyond would bring this point up. Let's understand something here. You're talking about a guy in Irvin Magic Johnson who happens to be black, and he's now the president of basketball operations. You're talking about a guy with a business background known for employing African Americans. This is one hire. That has nothing to do with the other numerous hires he may make within the Lakers organization. He wants to hit the ground running. He wants to get on his feet. He wants to have somebody he can trust. He's consulted with Kobe Bryant, one of the all-time greats himself. So essentially, Magic Johnson, in concert with Kobe Bryant, hired somebody white, and we have a problem with this when there are numerous other hires to be made. I just think at certain times you've got to know when to play a certain position. You've got to know when to speak up and when to shut the hell up. You've got to understand that in pursuit of fairness and equity under the system in which we live, it's not just for us to achieve it, but it's also for us to exercise it when we're in those positions. Certainly you see a plethora of African Americans that are deserving of opportunities, not just to be GMs, but to be scouts, to be assistant coaches, to be coaches, to be player personnel directors, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm certainly empathetic to that. I speak about that on quite many occasions on this very platform, which is called First Take on ESPN. But the reality is that doesn't mean that you don't hire somebody white who's qualified and can get the job done. And you especially don't bring that into question when you're talking about a man who has a history of success in the world of business by employing black folks. I just think that this is not the person to make this argument with, particularly at this juncture in time. We have a black man who is a 5-time champion, who is a Hall of Famer, who is one of the greatest players to have ever lived, who is now the president of basketball operations for one of the most storied franchises in the history of sports, who's going to have plenty of opportunities to hire an abundance of other people. To trip over this one hire, I find utterly ridiculous.
This is not an easy subject in the sense that I don't think there's an easy answer here. On the one hand, I agree with the sentiment, Stephen A., that this is Magic Johnson, who's African-American, maybe with the help of Kobe Bryant, who's African-American, hiring a guy that they like who happens not to be. However, that's kind of the point in the NFL of the Rooney Rule, because the fact is African-Americans are incredibly underrepresented in NBA front offices in terms of the GM position, as Molly just spoke about, as she referenced. And why is that? Is that because African Americans are somehow not as good at GMing as white guys? No. It's because of the history of our country. I mean, that is why. It's the same reason that ownership is largely white. It's a concentration of wealth as a legacy of this country's original sin. And so how has the NFL gone about addressing this? The Rooney Rule, which I'm sure as people are jumping through those hoops, they don't like it. It feels like bureaucratic red tape. I know who I want to hire. So what if it's a white guy? I just want to hire this guy. But that's the point. That white guy you want to hire is because when you reach a certain level, that's who you come in contact with. Again, as a legacy of the history of our country. And the whole point of the Rooney Rule in the NFL is to make sure that, or to attempt to somewhat kind of balance the scales there, at least in front offices. And so I'm sure the Pittsburgh Steelers at some point, the Rooney Rule, were like, oh, do we really have to talk to this Mike Tomlin guy? I know I want to hire. Oh, look at this. Yeah, I do really want to talk to this Mike Tomlin guy. And in fact, I want to hire that guy. And had he never been in front of me, I wouldn't have hired him. And so here, despite the fact that we're talking about Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant, African-American, and they're hiring a white guy, if I am a black executive, if I'm an African-American executive somewhere else, I'm kind of peeved that this was an inside job, that the job was never actually available, and I never got in front of these guys. And partly that's because they've reached a certain level, and who have they come in contact with in this case for this job? Not me. And I wish it was. So I'm not claiming that it's an easy topic, because there's nothing wrong on the surface with just hiring the guy you want to hire for the job. But the fact that it was an inside job, the fact that they had already picked this guy, and the fact that if I were an African-American candidate, I never got a look, would bother me precisely because African-Americans are severely underrepresented as GMs.
I wholeheartedly disagree. I think this is an incredibly easy conversation and an easy call. The only way that race has anything to do with this topic is if you force it on the equation. The only way that someone's skin color, on whether or not they get an interview or the potential job, is if you require it to be a consideration. You've admitted as much when you said, effectively, that's what the Rooney Rule does, and we should have something similar. You know who else was snubbed in this hire of Rob Pelinka by Magic Johnson?
All kinds of white guys.
Numerous white guys who are eminently qualified, just like those black executives that were interviewed by the undefeated. So white guys were snubbed and black guys were snubbed. What does that tell us? That tells us that the Los Angeles Lakers and and Magic Johnson knew who they wanted because they had a relationship, because they thought he was qualified, because he's an agent with deep relationships with numerous stars, from James Harden to Trevor Ariza, that he could monopolize on.
Why are African Americans underrepresented as GMs?
I want to address that, but just to be clear, Rob Pelinka was qualified. The relationships he had going into this are why he got the job and why no one else was interviewed, including black and white guys. Your premise and your question to me says, why are black guys underrepresented as NBA GMs?
Right.
My answer back to you is a question. What is underrepresented? 3 of 30 NBA executives are black. Give me the standard first, and then we can address why. What is the appropriate number of representation?
Let's say in a league that is about half African American, you would agree with the influx of foreign players?
75%.
75% still African American. Would you say that 10% of GMs being represented in front offices by African Americans is out of whack when 75% of the players are African American?
Well, my answer to you is I don't know. Is there any
Why do you think they're underrepresented?
Let me answer
Why do you think they're underrepresented?
I am not submitting that there is underrepresentation because I don't know that player ratio should reflect GM ratio. It may or may not, but I know that R.C. Buford, I know that Sam Presti, these guys have, if they have basketball careers, Bob Myers, these guys have collegiate level basketball careers. Thomas Dimitroff in the NFL. Theo Epstein in Major League Baseball. These aren't star players. These aren't players.
You're being willfully ignorant if you ignore the fact that the same reason that the GMs are underrepresented, the reason the owners are underrepresented, African American owners, the concentration of wealth based on the legacy of our country.
I know, Stephen. I want to get you. I just want to say
based on the legacy of our country.
I just want y'all to know. No, I'm gonna let y'all go. I just want y'all to know while y'all two are going back and forth, there's a black guy here.
Yeah, but I didn't notice
speaking
that.
about African Americans. But go ahead. Go ahead. I'll wait.
No,
wait. Go ahead.
Trust me. I personally, and I think we both want to hear your point of view on this, but by the way, the words that are coming out of our mouth now have nothing to do with our skin color. I think this, Max, I think there are many reasons why there are 3 out of 30 NBA executives who are black, but I don't know that it should necessarily be reflective of the player ratio. I don't know of a direct correlation between players becoming GMs that's the secret to success. You believe there's an underrepresentation, and you have the answer. I'm not sure
what
your
about
answer's
ownership?
Right.
What about ownership?
Ownership's a different conversation.
I think I think there's a strong positive correlation there. But
let's keep in mind, Rob Pelinka did play in college.
Yes, many of these guys did play in college.
First of all, without using specific words, there's no question that race and color and ethnicity is a significant part of this conversation, Will. Where I jump off the wagon as it pertains to what you said is for the simple reason that a black man by the name of Irvin Magic Johnson is the president of basketball operations. And so when we think and we invoke the Rooney Rule, for example, with the National Football League, you're talking about African Americans being bypassed, not even being considered for the job, being ostracized to some degree, and how there needed to be a rule in place to force owners and executives in influential positions to ingratiate themselves with a pool of individuals so we could find out whether or not indeed the most qualified candidates were being considered. That's not an issue with the NFL. Richard Lapchick and his report on race and sports that comes out annually, the NBA religiously gets an A+ grade, an A grade rather, because of the work that they've done with minority communities, African American coaches, African American executives, etc., etc. Ownership with Bob Johnson, now Michael Jordan. No other sports league has minority owners. So we have to take that into consideration. But the reason I spoke up so adamantly on behalf of Magic Johnson is because I'm saying, excuse me, you're whining about the fact that he didn't pick an African American as a GM. When we address the issue of race, this dude is a black man who happens to be above the GM. He's the president of basketball operations for the Los Angeles Lakers. And by virtue of him being in that position, therefore being in a position where he's going to be able to hire other minorities for other positions, that's a very significant thing that needs to be acknowledged on the part of those who are whining and moaning about the GM position specifically.
I agree with that from Magic's point of view. That's why I don't think it's actually an easy conversation, Will and Stephen A. Because from Magic's point of view, you're right. If Magic knows who he wants to give him the job. But that's the issue in the American workplace, basically, is that, let alone in these leagues, is that it's an inside job oftentimes. You know who you want. You have the relationship with them. And if a group has been largely excluded throughout the history of our country from those relationships, they will tend to be underrepresented in those jobs because they haven't come into the same kind of contact or had the same opportunity. That's the whole issue. From the point of view of Magic, I agree with you. From the point of view of an African-American executive who never had the chance, and you're right, Will, also there are white executives who never had the chance, but that's not a larger social issue of white executives not having the chance.
So, okay, look, you are, and I'm not disproving or agreeing with your larger social issue, but you superimpose it on every single individual incidents. And this equation, Stephen A., about Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson, to me, is not different than the conversation you and I are having. At some point, I guess I can be guilty of being overly aspirational in that we should view each other as individuals on our own merits and our own words.
Post-racial.
When I'm having this conversation with Max, by the way, and I'm sitting here listening to his words and debating him, I'm not thinking there's a black guy offset who we need to get in. I'm thinking Stephen A's offset, and I want to get Stephen A in. And I think that's not unlike this situation. Magic Johnson saw an individual in Rob Pelinka who he thought had merit and qualification, and he set aside the man's skin color. And it's wrong to go back, even because of Max's larger societal equation, to say, no, let's take this other factor in, one beyond his merits, his race.
And I'm going to say to you, Will, you're entitled to have that vantage point, that viewpoint. I respect it. But I also have the right to have mine. I am a black man.
Of course.
Listen to me. I'm not saying that you're saying otherwise. I'm just trying to make my point. What I'm saying to you is that as a black man, I live in a different world than you do. You're talking about the issues of fairness, a fair and equitable system. I get that. I applaud you for that. But you have to acknowledge that we live in a system that historically hasn't been fair and just. And folks like myself have been victimized by it, and folks like yourself have not. And so as a result of that, your vantage point and how you view things, while to be respected and honored because you're not wrong, you have to respect the fact that I'm not wrong either because I'm coming from a different vantage point than you.
And that's all I'm saying. I just want to say one last thing about this.
Last word, please.
Will, the idea to live in a post-racial world is an admirable one, and that is an ideal toward which I think we should all strive. The fact is, as the scales of social justice are this imbalanced, to pretend that we already live in that world, I don't think is clear thinking.
I'm not. I'm setting aspirations.
I'm with it. So obviously a lot of criticism towards the Rob Pelinka hiring. As for Magic Johnson, it was like cheers heard around the world as he was named president of basketball operations for the Lakers. But not everyone feeling the move. Our Dan Lebitard had this to say. Take a listen.
Magic Johnson was given a late night television show because he's famous and charming. Failed in 11 shows. Magic Johnson was given a head coaching job of the Lakers because he's famous and charming. Failed in 16 games. Magic Johnson, not interesting as a broadcaster, given broadcasting opportunity after broadcasting opportunity because he's famous and charming. And now he gets to run the entire Lakers organization because he's famous and charming. All of these great jobs that there are many more qualified people for standing in line who won't get a sniff of those jobs because Magic Johnson just cuts line. He cuts the line.
All right, here we go. Dan not holding back here. Max, do you agree with him?
Of course. Charisma helps people in their careers. It's helped Magic Johnson clearly. It even helped him as a point guard. Walk into a room, make everyone feel like they can be the best version of themselves, aspirationally, right? It helps him. It helps him get jobs. But one major thing is being overlooked, and it relates to what we just spoke about in terms of relationships. His relationship with the owner goes back almost 40 years, and it's familial. It's sibling-ish. So that, I think, more than his charisma and likability is what got Magic the job. Jeannie Buss and Magic Johnson have known each other since they were 19 years old. That's, I think, the biggest.
He's also one of the greatest players ever.
Right.
Stephen A.?
Well, I disagree with Dan Le Batard vehemently so, because he was critical of it. When you ask the question, do we agree with Dan Le Batard, he's not just pointing out something. He's being critical of it in this particular instance. And I emphatically disagree with him. Magic Johnson, yeah, he got to the head of the line because he's Irvin Magic Johnson. You might have a good point about him having a damn talk show. You might have a good point about, something else that he's done. But basketball with the Lakers, what qualifications are you exactly in need of if you're Dan Le Batard? We are living in an age where a whole bunch of numbers crunchers never played basketball a day in their damn life. If they stepped on the court, it might cause a damn allergic reactions. They come from MIT and other places, and they're numbers crunchers. They're analytics. Now, what are they doing? They're getting GM jobs all over the place. I didn't hear Dan Le Batard speak about that. Maybe he has, because he speaks about everything because he's a brilliant brother. But at the same time, maybe he has not. I haven't heard that. But somehow, some way, we're going to have a problem with an individual that won 5 championships with the Lakers, with an individual that's been a basketball commentator, with an individual that is considered universally as a basketball savant. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about Irvin Magic Johnson. We're not talking about the coach that's got to get players to play for him. We're not talking about a dude that's hosting a talk show. We're talking about a guy that's an executive, that's an overseer, that looks at the game of basketball, particularly the team he now stewards, and we're saying, we're literally questioning whether this man is qualified for the job. Jump to the head of the line. As far as I'm concerned, those other candidates should have moved the hell to the side the second they heard Magic Johnson's footsteps, because when it comes to basketball up here, and then you take into account Lakers lore, unless Kobe Bryant stood up and said, I want to be president of basketball operations for the Los Angeles Lakers, I don't know of anyone else who should even be thinking of having a problem with Magic Johnson being the president of basketball operations for the Los Angeles Lakers. I love my man Dan Le Batard. That's my brother. I love him to death. But damn it, I don't know where the hell his head was with this particular argument. We emphatically disagree.
I agree with Dan Le Batard. I can't shower him with the same
I'm
phrases.
so surprised.
Well, why are you so surprised?
I'm so surprised that you I'm joking that you disagree with me, in other words. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's not unrelated to our last conversation. It's what factors do you take into account that qualifies someone for a job. I emphatically disagree with you that winning 5 championships qualifies you for being a head of basketball operations.
I didn't say just the championships. I talked about his knowledge of the game of basketball, which matters, especially when Jim Buss was your predecessor. Are you crazy?
Well, if
you have to deal with Jim Buss for these years?
Your standard was the proof of success for NBA executives, Michael Jordan would have multiple titles as an executive and be the best basketball executive in the NBA. Tim Duncan should be hired immediately. LeBron James's post-career is set in stone. Run a franchise.
I don't really have a problem with the things you just said.
Yeah.
I really don't have a problem with the things you just said. Keep going.
Because
keep going. I shouldn't. But go ahead.
Keep going. It hasn't worked out for Jordan. There's no direct correlation between winning on the court and turning into an excellent NBA executive.
Jordan was an owner, not Jordan. It was an owner.
Think he's not making decisions?
President of basketball operations.
You think he's not making decisions?
He traded from everyone from North Carolina. It didn't work out.
But you think he's just watching it go down?
No, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is you're allocating responsibility to others. As a president of basketball operations, Phil Jackson may have fooled us because he gives you the vision that he can sit on his perch and let everybody else do the work. But actual president of basketball operations are supposed to go out there and do that work, which Magic will do.
Stephen A. Magic Johnson is not above criticism. This hire is not above questioning. Magic Johnson's qualifications to be a point guard in the NBA are above reproach. They're unimpeachable. Magic Johnson's qualifications to be a coach, not as good. Much less of a stellar career. And Magic Johnson's qualifications to run a basketball organization basically come down to Max's point of him having a relationship with people just a few days ago you both said were somewhat incompetent in their hirings, and now you're saying, well, that's part of what led to his hiring here. And his success in other businesses. But when it comes to basketball, by the way, just as relevant would be his tweets on basketball, where he's given his opinion about what the Lakers should do, where he said Brandon Knight should be the #1 pick in the NBA, where he's made the statements like it's really hard to beat the Warriors when Clay and Steph are on their game. Anyone can see that. That takes no special
He also tweeted about Rondo
I love how
being
y'all
a
say
good
this.
player
I love
for the
how
last
y'all
couple
bring this
years.
up.
Yes,
I absolutely love how you bring this up. But a guy like Joe Dumars, who took the Pistons to 6 straight conference finals, all right, and won an NBA championship, went to back-to-back NBA finals, he loses his job. He can't get a sniff. We don't say a word about him. But Magic comes out of the wazoo, and he gets a president of basketball operations for a franchise he's been synonymous with and connected to. And all of a sudden, we want to have questions about him when his predecessor was Jim Buss. We're talking about a guy that has an eye for talent. Do we really want to sit up here and say that Magic Johnson's credentials does not compare to other aspiring president of basketball operations when it comes to noticing talent?
But that's not Dan Le Batard's point, I don't think. It seems to me that Dan Le Batard's making a valid point. If you are charismatic, if you are charming and famous, you get to jump the line. You're arguing here there's nothing wrong with that because in addition to being famous and charismatic and charming, he also has a very high basketball IQ.
Those are the two P words, in addition.
But there is evidence to question, not to say Magic's going to be bad at the job. I'm rooting for Magic. I think everybody is.
Yeah, he might be bad. He might be bad and he'll get fired if he is.
And to point to some of the evidence is tweets like, hey, Rondo's still so great when he was with Detroit and then Sacramento and then heading into this year when Rondo was terrible. He said Michael Carter Williams is the next Jason Kidd. Right. So that doesn't mean just because you are the greatest point guard who ever lived that you are necessarily going to be a great head of basketball operations, though Magic, I'm rooting for you. I hope that's true. The Le Batard's point in and of itself is charming, charismatic people who are famous get to skip the line, and it happened here.
People who can be a face of the organization, can sell the organization, can build a cachet for the organization that people will want to ingratiate itself with and support. All of those things y'all mentioned, any president of basketball operations could have came and made that mistake.
The jury's still out, even though he's got it all. Yes.
A lot of soap opera actors, a lot of actors out there out of work looking to get on General Hospital. That's right. And then all of a sudden, Stephen A. shows up.
I didn't take anybody's job. They added a job.
All of a sudden,
they added a job.
This charismatic guy shows up and he gets the job.
They added a job.
Speaking to a group of 3rd to 5th graders, Jameis Winston was giving his 3 rules of life: God, school, and the idea that I can do anything I put my mind to. But he's making headlines with how he went about motivating the boys in the class in particular.
All my young boys stand up, man. The ladies sit down. Sit down. But all my boys stand up. Stand up. We strong, right? We strong. We strong, right? Okay, all my boys, just tell me one time. I can do anything I put my mind to. A lot of boys don't supposed to be soft-spoken. You know what I'm saying? One day y'all gonna have a very deep voice like this. Right now y'all talking like this. But one day y'all have a very, very deep voice. But the ladies, they supposed to be silent, polite, gentle. But my men supposed to be strong. Okay, so I want y'all to tell me what the 3rd rule of life is. I can do anything I put my mind to. Scream it. All right, y'all can sit down now.
So after the talk, Winston admitted to the Tampa Bay Times that it was a poor choice of words, saying the ladies are supposed to be silent, polite, and gentle, and men are supposed to be strong. Max, what's your reaction?
Well, first of all, we didn't see what preceded. We didn't see what led up to that moment. Had it been the case that, I don't know, that he asked them the rule and they made noise and he heard the girls' voices and not the boys' voices and felt he needed to exhort the boys, that changes it a little bit. It seems to me that Jameis here is trying to exhort the boys to make more noise by appealing to a gender stereotype. Not so much, the intention wasn't to insult the girls, but to tell the boys that you're supposed to be loud. Boys are supposed to be loud. And it was clumsily put. And if it was the case that he was like, girls sit down because it's not important for you to be loud, then the message that girls are supposed to be gentle and quiet and polite is an insidious one. But if it was the case that he heard the girls and or later he would focus on the girls, or previously had focused on the girls, and here he was focusing on the boys, then it was an unfortunate appeal to gender stereotypes, but mainly in a way to kind of get something louder out of the boys, get more commitment. And nowadays, if that's caught on video and you've had legal problems in the past, it's a very, very bad look.
Well, the bottom line is that I'm happy he apologized because he needed to. It was a poor choice of words. It was wrong for him to say. And we live in a society, particularly if you're in the National Football League, with some of the problems that it's had to endure over the last several years, where there's a heightened level of sensitivity that you simply have to have. Everything doesn't have to be domestic violence of the physical nature for you to do something wrong to a woman. Yes, hitting a woman is wrong, but you can also treat a woman very wrong. You can also minimize her in such a way that's disrespectful and dismissive of her. And women and various women groups and others have taught us throughout the years, if our families hadn't taught us before then, that these things sometimes start at a very, very young age. Now, me personally, I was incredibly blessed because I have the greatest mother on the planet, and I have four older sisters. And let me tell you something right now. They're not demure. They're not silent. They're not thinking about being that way. And if I had ever intimated that they should be, I would have got slapped upside my head by my sisters. That's just the way that it is. So I've always gotten that message. Some people may not. And that's where we get to Jameis Winston. Do I think he needs to be vilified and excoriated for this? No, because I think his heart was in the right place. He went there to speak to elementary school kids about the things that they need to do. Unfortunately, those poor choice of words, while he may not need to be vilified, his words do. They need to be dismissed and absolutely positively denounced. And it needs to resonate with him that this is something that you can't say, because just like the little boys are our future, so are those beautiful little young ladies. And you need them just as much as you need the men to be all they can be. And you can't disseminate a message to them or beyond that gives the impression that they're minimized or they're second-class citizens, because those are the kind of things that have residual impacts in a very negative fashion. Yes. And more importantly than anything else, there's no excuse for it, because some of the greatest accomplishments throughout our history have been accomplished by women. Women have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're on our, if not a higher level than us.
Particularly if the case was, if it comes out, that he in fact kind of proactively told the girls, sit down, because you're not supposed to be loud or strong like the boys. Yeah. I have three daughters. And if one of my daughters came home from school and there was a guest speaker and she told me, yeah, the guy came and was talking to us and told all the girls, sit down and be quiet and don't make noise. The boys are supposed to make noise. You're supposed to be quiet. First of all, she never would have tolerated that in the moment, I don't think. But secondly, I would have a real problem if that is in fact what happened.
On that sentiment, one little girl
I want
also...
Molly. Yeah. I want Molly. I really want to hear what you have to say about this, Molly.
One little girl did say to her teacher when this happened, she said, I'm strong too. And I think that's the concern here. And I met Jameis Winston. Obviously, we did the show down there in Tampa during training camp, and I was really impressed by him, his poise, his leadership, especially for his age. So I only have the information and privy to the information that we all have, that video we saw. So I don't want to chastise him, but I can tell you this. I appreciate the message that he's saying in terms that you can be all you can be and be strong, and giving that message to the boys. It's so disappointing to hear that it's not the same message sent to the little girls as well. And from what I understand from the article I read on ESPN.com is that one of the boys was disengaged. So that's why he asked all the boys to stand up. But here's what I would say to that. Why do you need to disengage the girls to make that point? If you want to engage the boy, the girls can also be standing with you. They're also strong. They also can be all they can be. And as somebody, I grew up with a very strong father figure, and he was someone who said to me, he certainly, to be polite, yes, but who said to me, you need to be able to take care of yourself. You need to work hard. You need to be able to take care of yourself because you're the only person you can count on. And that's driven me my entire life. So if somebody's sending a message, you need to be silent, you need to be polite, and then have no voice. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today and be able to take care of myself.
His exhorting the boys by kind of teasing them using a gender stereotype reinforces the stereotype. It reinforces the assumptions of that stereotype, which is not healthy for the girls nor the boys to hear.
And if those are his values or beliefs, I just find that very disappointing, but to each his own. And unfortunately, that's something that we battle as we do racial issues, which we talked about earlier in the show.
The one thing that I would say is that we all recognize how wrong he was. There's no doubt about that. He's 23 years old. And sometimes you make those kind of mistakes. He better not make it again, and we get that part. But the other thing that's important to point out, we got a lot of people. You see somebody in the public eye, and because they're in the public eye, you want them to come speak. But when it comes to speaking to young minds, particularly if your fame allows you to be a significant and influential figure, rather than just inviting somebody to come and talk to kids just because they're famous. Perhaps you should do your homework and decipher whether or not they're qualified to speak to young kids and give the appropriate message, because some folks just may not know better. I don't believe for 1 second that Jameis Winston intended to offend anybody. He clearly went there out of the kindness of his heart trying to be an inspiration. But he dropped the ball when it came to the young ladies. Mm-hmm. And maybe he just didn't need to be in that position.
There is more to me, Queen Eliara of Elfgard, than my elven magic. Just as there's more to Geico than saving you money, Geico also gives you 24/7 access to licensed agents online, on the phone, or on the Geico app. And while I am a mighty elf queen, I am also a mighty big fan of barbecue potato chips. Minions! More smoky mesquite.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.
I think it's a great opportunity. I think we can both learn from one another. I think our games complement one another, and being together, I think it's going to make both of our jobs easier. So I'm excited for the opportunity. I think we can wreak havoc on this league. Will it happen overnight? Probably not, but the potential is scary. So like I said, I'm excited for this opportunity.
That was DeMarcus Cousins saying that he and Anthony Davis will wreak havoc on the NBA, and that havoc begins tonight against the Rockets. Both Cousins and Davis are averaging 27 points, over 10 rebounds per game this season. So we're wondering, Max Kellerman,
yes,
who should be the Batman on the court for the Pelicans?
Ready for this, Molly? Ready for this for Stephen A? You ready for this?
No.
On the court, Batman should be Boogie Cousins.
Really?
Oh, Lord.
Anthony Davis is a better player than Boogie Cousins. I'm not talking about...
No, don't qualify it. Don't qualify it. Say what you got to say.
I am not talking about the locker room. I'm just talking about on the court, on the floor. You want to work inside out.
Hold on, Max. Max, let me get relaxed for this. Hold on. Let me kick my feet up here. You go ahead. Let me kick my feet up here for this one. Let me get my blueberry muffin. Go ahead, Max. Take your time, Max. I can't believe this. I want to hear this.
Who's the more effective
Take as much time as you need. Take as much time as you need. Go ahead.
Who's the more effective inside player, Stephen A? Boogie or Anthony Davis? Inside, who's more effective?
Don't ask me no questions. Just go ahead and speak.
You know
the answer.
You might want to move into the frame. There you go. The answer is Boogie Cousins. He's the more effective inside player. Now, here's the other strange thing. Anthony Davis, famously, he was celebrated for being a point guard who grew a foot suddenly, and now all of a sudden he's a 4 or 5. He's a big. So he should have point guard skills in passing, and he can pass the ball. But who's the better passer? Actually, Boogie Cousins, who's a brilliant and underrated passer for a big. So you have a guy who's more effective on the inside and the better passer. Let Anthony Davis face up and play off the attention that Boogie is going to get down low. What does that mean? Anthony Davis still be the better player. Anthony Davis may even score more. But the offense, and I'm not even talking about the defense. On the defensive end, let Boogie crash the boards, Anthony Davis protect the rim and all those things. On the offensive side, the attention has to go to Boogie down low. That's how this offense will work best. The locker room, everything else is a different story. But let Anthony Davis face up and play off the attention. Boogie Cousins, Batman, is going to get down low.
You finished?
I am, for now.
Max Kellerman. So let me get this straight. You just finished sitting here and saying that Boogie Cousins may not very well be the best player.
Correct.
Did you say that?
Yep.
Did you say that?
Mm-hmm.
You said he may not be the best player. You also said he may not be the best leader. Right? Did you say that?
That's for sure.
Did you say that?
Yes.
He's not going to be the
Maybe
best
the
leader.
worst leader.
He's not going to be the best. He's not going to be the best leader. He's not going to be the best player. But he needs to be Batman. What is wrong with you, Max? Only you. I give it to you. Only you can say this stuff. It's unbelievable that you would come to this conclusion. It's hilarious. Boogie Cousins, who is a stud. He's the best big man in basketball. Oh. Don't get me wrong. But Anthony Davis is on another level, bro. When you talk about Boogie Cousins.
Is he a big too? You just said Boogie's the best big man, but Anthony Davis is on another level. Is Anthony Davis a big?
No. I don't consider Anthony Davis
why
just
not?
a big man.
Why not?
I consider him all world. I consider him all world.
Boogie's down low.
I let you talk. Did I interrupt you?
Yes,
I
you
thought
did.
I let
You
go.
did let me
Here's
talk.
the deal. Here's the deal, Max. I'm saying to you, Boogie Cousins is the best big man, meaning a center. I'm telling you, Anthony Davis in 2 years, maybe less, will be the best player in the world. This dude, 6'10", 6'11", back to the basket, facing the basket, three-point mid-range, drive to the lane, does everything. Defensive end of the floor, he's a shot blocker as well. By the way, when he went in the playoffs, some place Boogie Cousins has never been, by the way, never been. When Anthony Davis was last seen in the playoffs the season before last, you know that year that Golden State actually won the championship? What did Anthony Davis average? 31 and a half and 11 rebounds, okay, on 54% shooting when there was no one else on the floor with him against Golden State. This is Anthony
He played
Davis
him past the Spurs to get him in the playoffs, and the Spurs were fighting for home court. So, Anthony Davis is the man, of course.
I'm just saying to you, he's all world, but you want him to be Robin.
Well,
really?
Really? Not exactly Robin.
What?
He's Robin
excuse me, it's one or the
10.
other. Hold it. There can't be two Batmans.
Well,
it's
no,
Batman
that's right.
and Robin. That's what it is.
Batman's got to be Boogie.
You've watched enough Marvel comics and all of that stuff. Don't act like you don't know. There can only be one Batman, and there can only be one Robin.
Right.
You don't get to sit there and say Batman and saw him in half.
Who says Batman has to
them.
team up with Robin? Maybe he's teamed up with Aquaman. How do you know? The point is that the offense on the
Aquaman, there's water in all. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. It's underwater. Come on. On the offensive side of the ball, the offense has got to run strategically through Boogie down low. Boogie can shoot from the outside, too. But from Boogie down low, he's the more effective inside player. He's the better passer. Let Anthony Davis feed off of that.
He also leads the league in technical fouls.
Sure.
That's your leader?
No.
Really?
No, that's who you're running the offense through.
That's Batman.
in
That's
that
Batman
sense.
for you.
Yeah.
Batman who might get ejected the very next game. The second he gets a technical foul, he's ejected. That's your Batman?
Batman plays.
Really?
He's a vigilante. He plays by his own rules, Stephen A. Smith.
Gosh.
And let's not bring up Aquaman in New Orleans. We know we have to be incredibly sensitive to that.
Yeah, right, of course. Right.
Absolutely.
I meant
but the
sea
point
level.
is,
It's below sea level.
I know what you meant, but I'm just saying, you know how people
Yes.
can run away with stuff, so we
Sure.
gotta make sure of that. Bottom line is this. Boogie Cousins is no joke. But even being no joke, even being the best big man in basketball, he is no Anthony Davis. I can promise you that. That is nonsense.
No,
Nonsense.
Anthony Davis is the better player, but listen, on the Dream Team, the original Dream Team, did they run the offense through Michael Jordan, the greatest player who ever lived? Actually, Charles Barkley used to lead that team in scoring. Charles Barkley was kind of Batman on that team.
They were playing against Angola. Will you stop it?
By the way, the hopes of New Orleans is that these two guys can turn the rest of the league into some lesser version of basketball teams. These twin towers can be used as any effective twin tower pair is used, not with both down low. There's not enough room. Someone's got to play outside facing up. That's going to be Anthony Davis, and the attention should go down low through Boogie, making him the Batman of the offense.
We are now only hours from the trade deadline, and there's been a lot of talk out of Boston about what move they're going to make. Reports have them connected to Carmelo and Jimmy Butler. Max Kellerman, who should the Celtics trade for? You going Melo or Jimmy Buckets?
The answer is actually Carmelo Anthony, because these things don't take place in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. It depends on what you have to give up to get them. Jimmy Butler's a better fit for the team. He's a two-way player. But you have to give up right now. The sticking point is not only the Nets pick, which could easily be number one overall. It's not top three protected, not lottery protected. So you could get the number one overall pick in the draft and Avery Bradley, and they're hung up on Crowder. You know, most people I've spoken to about this feel like the Knicks would be lucky to just get the pick. So if you don't have to give up actual rotation pieces who are valuable, especially on the defensive end, to get Carmelo, just for the pick you can do it. It's a lot. Or you have to give up the pick plus assets that could weaken your team right now to get Butler. You might as well go get Carmelo.
I agree with you that Carmelo is the guy to get it, but the reasons why are different than yours. I do believe that Melo is a better fit for the Boston Celtics. I do believe as a talent he's a better fit. I love Jimmy Butler. He can put up points, but not the way Melo can do it in terms of his perimeter accuracy. He definitely plays better defense than Melo. There's no question about that. But I think if you're Brad Stevens, you've got requisite parts that can be on the floor defensively. And I think the impediment to Boston's success is that other than that 5'9" miniature dynamo and Isaiah Thomas, who is one of the league-leading candidates for league MVP honors, you don't have a guy that you can give the ball to when it counts in crunch time and say, take me there, close this deal. Not only that, if you're the New York Knicks, Crowder, I like Crowder. I like Crowder a lot.
Me too.
And I think that he's a piece that you want on your team. I like Avery Bradley a lot, too. Max, both of them are 26 years old.
Yep.
If I'm the New York Knicks, I don't hesitate, but I also know that I'm not empowered because it's something that Melo has to approve because he has that no-trade clause, and that's what it comes down to.
In other words, Carmelo doesn't want to go to a place that's weakened by the trade for him, which is what happened with Denver.
I was told, Max, that he would want, if there was a way possible, he would want the team to remain intact, like a Crowder staying there.
That's why I love the idea.
He doesn't want to leave.
That's why I love the idea of the Knicks, Celtics making a trade. Of course, also the Celtics don't want to be haunted by players coming back and playing them and all those things. Neither do the Knicks. Tough to trade within the division. But if the Knicks could get that Nets pick for Carmelo, just the Nets pick, that's a haul. That might be the best overall pick in the draft.
You ain't getting no potentially number one overall pick for Carmelo.
Right, but you are
Danny
getting
Ainge is not going to give that up.
You are getting it for Butler, and you're getting Avery Bradley for Butler, and you might even get Crowder. That's the sticking point. So what I'm saying is if the Celtics are serious about getting that other shot creator to get on the floor with Isaiah Thomas, lift some of the burden from him, yes, Jimmy Butler can get his own shot, but if he's going to cost you defensive guys who you need with Isaiah Thomas in addition, you're weakening yourself defensively and the pick, forget that. No. I would consider trading that pick to the Knicks for Carmelo. You keep your team intact.
No urgency for Boston to do anything because they're not expected to win this year no matter who they get. You keep that pick, particularly when it could be number one overall.
Dear citizens of New England, I am here on behalf of a beleaguered sports nation with a message for you. No one anywhere in this country feels any sympathy whatsoever for you and your teams. There are sympathetic characters, and then there are all of you. Want to know why? Every single one of your major sports franchises has won a championship in the last 10 years, yet somehow you still play the persecution card. Just this week, 5-time champion Patriots owner Robert Kraft said publicly that he doesn't hold grudges, but he'll remember the injustice of Deflategate. So let's review the case that he and his team and all you fans are victims in all this. First, your best ever quarterback did or did not cheat on the way to your 4th Super Bowl title. Next, there was an investigation during which said incredible quarterback destroyed evidence. Then, the league commissioner suspended the quarterback. The quarterback fought the suspension and lost. The commissioner did indeed have the power vested in him, in part, by owners like Robert Kraft and also by the players' union. So the 39-year-old quarterback sat the first 4 games of the season, the team went 3-1, and the backup quarterback increased his potential trade value to first-round pick level. The rested, healthy star quarterback returned and basically ran the table, giving a 5th chip to Mr. Kraft and all of stubbornly self-pitying New England. But Robert Kraft, a bazillionaire champion, otherwise immune to criticism, will remember how awful the whole Deflategate thing was. Please. Hey, New England, living well is the best revenge. Whining after everything, and I mean everything, goes your way all the time. There's a reason everyone hates you guys. It's not that your teams are so good. It's that you handle it all so badly. Get over yourselves. Please. Sincerely, everyone else.
Max, where are you from?
New York City.
New York City. No, well said.
Good question, Molly.
That was fantastic, as always. We will see you guys all tomorrow. And, of course, for more Final Takes, you head to our Facebook and Twitter pages. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Catch First Take weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.